Welcome to Discovering the Law. My name is Attorney Lucy Rivera, and this program can be viewed at www.discoveringthelaw.net. We are very excited today to have a special guest, Secretary of Public Safety and Security, Mary Elizabeth Heffernan. Secretary of Public Safety and Security Heffernan oversees secretariat agencies and also boards, which are dedicated to control crime and safety. Secretary Heffernan.
Thank you for having me very much, Lucy.
We're delighted that you're here.
Thank you.
And tell us about the responsibilities of your agency and the importance and all the work that you do.
Certainly. Thank you, and thank you for having me. I'm the Secretary of Public Safety and Security, as you mentioned, and in that role, I oversee 14 agencies and commissions that range from the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, which is here in Boston, to the State Police, the Department of Corrections, the emergency management functions of the Commonwealth. It's a wide breadth of agencies that deal with law enforcement, criminal justice, public safety, and homeland security.
And it seems that this is a very broad responsibility, that all these agencies, and I was looking at your webpage, and there are many other agencies. What is your background? How did you prepare for this role, big role?
Well, it's hard to prepare for. I'm delighted that the governor appointed me. It will be 2 years that I've been secretary in January, actually. My background is I grew up in Boston. I went to public schools in Boston, and I went to college locally. And I've always been involved in, interested in law and politics and so forth. So I went and got my master's in public administration at night. I got my law degree at night, and I honed an interest in this throughout those years, really, in the kind of government and law. I was lucky enough to go and clerk in the appeals court, and I also was at a law firm. And I was then at the district attorney's office in Middlesex County, where I learned how to prosecute cases, and I really enjoyed being on my feet and doing that as a job. And that morphed into running the executive office of the District Attorneys Association, which is a professional association of all the DAs, which was a wonderful opportunity for me. And then I was in the legal office of the Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center and at the Care Group Healthcare System as well. From that job, when Governor Patrick was elected, Secretary Burke, then Secretary of Public Safety, asked me to join his team as the Undersecretary of Criminal Justice. So I joined that team, and when he left, Secretary Burke went in to teach in academia. I was grateful and delighted that Governor Patrick sought me and appointed me as secretary.
And we're very proud, and it
you.
seems like we're in great hands.
Thank you. I think so. I appreciate it.
We believe that. Secretary Heffernan, how do you identify the policies of your agency, and talk to us about that?
Certainly. So as a cabinet secretary, there are 8 cabinet secretaries in Governor Patrick's cabinet and Lieutenant Governor Murray's cabinet. And you know, we would make sure that the policies that the governor and lieutenant governor want us to put forth, we implement those policies. So in my area of public safety and security, for example, a policy and a priority of Governor Patrick's and Lieutenant Governor Murray's is trying to prevent youth violence and doing something about escalating youth violence in the Commonwealth. So, for example, we're working on an initiative called the Safe and Successful Youth Initiative that the governor made a priority of this administration's term. We have just received $10 million from the legislature to fund this program, and we have just given out grants to a number of communities across the state to help them and their partners as they try to figure out how we can really stem this real growing problem of youth violence. That might be making sure that people are engaged in activities outside of school. Young people are, making sure that the law enforcement community partners up with folks in their community to do prevention techniques. It might be some sort of law enforcement suppression. There are a number of activities that the communities themselves identified as needs that we hopefully will make sure that they can see through.
And also when there are natural disasters, how would your office respond when these things happen?
Well, that's interesting. That's another area that we also have. So you've got on the one hand a large grant office, the Office of Grants and Research, which is staffed by wonderful people. And I have to say parenthetically, I have the best staff in state government. I'm proud to say it, and I say it often. And I'm delighted that I have so many great commissioners and undersecretaries that work with me. But the priority around emergency management and Homeland Security, you may recall after September 11th, the Homeland Security funds were identified by the federal government. They flowed to the states. That still happens, but the monies have subsided quite significantly. But our state has taken on, and this is true nationally, I think, we merged really the efforts of emergency preparedness with Homeland Security, and we find that that partnership between fire services, between the local law enforcement, between all sorts of agencies within the Red Cross or the Department of Public Utilities, all that communication really stands us in good stead when we do have, unfortunately, an emergency such as we're experiencing with our storm that we just occurred over this past week and this October snowstorm. We've had an unprecedented number of weather events during my tenure, actually, as secretary, and the governor handles those. He makes sure that we handle them as professionally as we can, with making sure that people's care is taken care of. I mean, it's a real public safety concern, but it's also a communication concern. And his priority is to make sure that people are kept safe, but they also get the information that they need to help them weather a disaster like we would be faced with in this state.
Challenging.
It's challenging, exactly.
Secretary Heffernan, I read that before this appointment, you were the Undersecretary of the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security, also known as EOPS.
Yes.
And as you mentioned, the governor identifies the policy, but EOPS implements these policies.
Yes.
What are some of the policies that your office is working on, the priorities?
Well, I mentioned the youth initiative, which is
Yes.
Definitely a priority of ours, and I know of the governor's as well. We have just filed, for example, a comprehensive crime bill, which the legislature will hopefully be taking up soon. It's been heard by the Judiciary Committee, and it involves sentencing sentencing reform and the way we handle the prison population. In this state, we have almost 25,000 people incarcerated, combined with the sheriffs. The sheriffs have their about 11,000 people in the county jails, and then we have about 14,000 people, rather switch that, 11,000 people in the state prisons and 14,000 people in the county facilities, which the sheriffs run. That's 25,000 people that are incarcerated. And projections show that if we continue with the same sentencing policies, with the same kind of crime statistics that we have, that we'll unfortunately be raising the population by 2.5% over the next 5 to 10 years. We can't build our way out of this problem, and we don't have enough beds to house all those people. So the governor undertook a corrections master plan, which looked at all of the institutions, the physical plants of these institutions, to try to figure out where our needs would best be met. That was one piece, the bricks and mortar piece. He also realized that we needed to file something around sentencing reform. And this is a national problem, which many other states are facing. They're also facing the fact that these corrections budgets cannot be sustained. As inmates grow older and as their medical needs are more acute, we can't continue with this budget problem. So we decided to look at nonviolent mandatory minimum drug offenders, those people that are serving sentences that were implemented in the 1980s for drug offenders, where if someone was selling a certain amount of cocaine on the corner and they had no violence, they didn't use a gun, a child wasn't involved, there's no violence in their record, they would be in jail for 3 years, but they couldn't do any programming per law. They couldn't program to lower offense. They couldn't program down through the system to get into work release. So the chances are that person would come out and probably go back to doing the same thing that they were doing. Some of the folks that are incarcerated in this situation are substance abusers. So we needed to take a different approach, and that's hopefully what our approach does, making sure the right people are in, the violent offenders that need to be incarcerated are in beds, but taking a look that maybe nonviolent drug offenders could be eligible for parole.
Are the people currently incarcerated, would you say that, do you have a sense as to how many or whether it's a bigger amount incarcerated versus other years or in other decades?
Well, unfortunately, and this is true nationally, you've got something called the Pew Institute that just did a study that shows that, you know, in the world, that the United States incarcerates more people, you know, per population than anywhere else in the world. And that's not a good thing, we think, because it's not a good thing for recidivism. We need to keep people that are violent offenders that belong in prison for the amount of time that they deserve. They need to be there. People that are possibly substance abusers or low-level, non-violent drug offenders, we hope that they could be treated in the community with treatment, monitored with either through a bracelet or through some real supervision, and it's just a better way to provide public safety. It's a smarter way to provide public safety.
Thank you, Secretary Heffernan. For all our viewers who have just joined us, we're here with Secretary Mary Elizabeth Heffernan, and Mary Elizabeth Heffernan is the Secretary of Public Safety and Security, and we are thrilled to have her, Secretary Heffernan.
Thank you.
Just wanted to follow up on that question and just get a sense from you. Do you believe that crime in Massachusetts is up compared to other times, decades, or legislation?
It's interesting. Nationally, crime appears to be, you know, going down. A lot of the policing, for example, in Boston, Commissioner Davis does a wonderful job of making community policing a priority and really having the community see that there are police officers on the street and making sure that we connect that way with our officers. Crime is down. I think you'll see that there are some pockets of places throughout that, you know, the economy may have been affected by it, but nationally crime has gone down, and that's due to the good work that police officers do in partnership with a lot of non-governmental agencies, and it's a good work that the citizens do too in terms of reporting and keeping in touch with their local law enforcement as to crimes that do occur and making sure that they're in touch with what happens in their own neighborhoods.
Secretary Heffernan, to accomplish the Secretary's goals, you are going to need a budget. And how is your budget? How would that affect, with this economy, all your programs that you've discussed with us?
You know, the economy, everyone understands that when Governor Patrick and Lieutenant Governor Murray were elected and we were all appointed, we came in with some really great ideas about implementing some wonderful opportunities. Then the worst economic crisis that ever hit anywhere hit us. I think, though, that we have weathered that well. We have managed to accomplish some of the priorities that Governor Patrick put out, for example, Corey reform, which was passed last year through the good works of many legislators in this area. And we have some real accomplishments that we can show. We also have a great bond rating in this state. And because of the work that the governor and his cabinet has put in place around tightening up certain programs, making sure that the right priorities get taken care of, I think we're able to put forth some programs. But you're right, budgets continue to be a challenge. I mentioned corrections is the largest budget in my secretariat. We just put on, for example, a new state police class. Because of budget funds, the state police force was down almost 450 members. That's very, very expensive for overtime for the state police, but because of the governor's priority, we were able just recently to put a new class on. We're showing some nice, good signs of the economy growing a little bit, hopefully in my area we'll be able to continue doing the priorities that we find so important.
And Secretary Heffernan, which agencies do you think have been the most affected by the budget constraints?
In my office, I know that the two biggest budget busters or budgets that I have are corrections and the state police.
Mm-hmm.
And we also have some smaller agencies that unfortunately, because we can't grow budgets a certain percentage, they actually have suffered, and services may suffer because of that. I mentioned the CORI reform, the criminal offender record information. When you have to cut back on the number of people that you have in that office that check records, well then you may have a delay in, for example, summer camps that need to check the records of counselors, and then people get anxious about that, or if you've got people that are coming into the country on special programs that you need to check backgrounds on, those things might get affected. So it's little things that the public may not see in general, but it affects the way that we do business. And I think that's the priority that we've tried to stop, is making sure that service is kept apace with the way that the budgets are going.
And you've mentioned the CORI twice.
Yes.
And there was a bill that passed in August this year, 2011, for reform.
Yes.
Would you tell us about that bill and
Sure.
describe to us what is the significance of that?
Actually, we just celebrated the year anniversary, so I'm delighted that we passed CORI reform around a year ago, which is wonderful. It was a priority of the governor's. And what it means in layman's term is that I think people understand that if you make a mistake, you need to, our society requires us to pay for that mistake. But it shouldn't be something that you pay for forever. And I think that this information is now, it makes sure that people get the right information, employers get information, landlords get information, they get correct information, and it's not piecemeal. That the idea is that someone has a record, for example, they apply for a job, they don't get the job, then they have the opportunity to talk to that employer about why that didn't happen. We can't mandate, except for a state government, folks to get an interview or some sort of discussion around the job, but we can start the conversation around private employers. It's going to make a big difference for ex-offenders particularly, and young people that may have records that want to get employed and want to keep a job and want to show that they can really turn themselves around.
And the criminal offender record information, also known as CORI, is now this new, the changes that were made to this law still allow employers to view the records.
They do. They allow them to view the records, and what was happening was there were so-called data aggregators, so private companies would be paid to go out from courthouse to courthouse to gather information on, say, Mary Beth Heffernan.
Yeah.
And that information may not be correct. It may not be up to date because it may just be arrest information. You may not get the final disposition of the case. And what we hope to correct with the CORI reform is a database that shows people in real time and with at least some good time, within a timely fashion, what your record is, who's looking at your record, and how long that record is expected to be open. Employers need to know if someone has serious offenses on their record that would affect vulnerable populations or the financial industry or so forth. Absolutely, people need to know that. But if someone committed a crime many years ago that doesn't have any bearing on their current life,
which is not a violent crime or a sexual offender crime, is what
all sexual offenses and all murder, manslaughter, any crimes like that would always be available to people. Yes.
And we're talking about misdemeanors who do affect and who turn out to be convictions, and unfortunately they pop in.
That's right. And we close those. We make those comported with the time that you and as an attorney know this. When you can bring in prior bad acts during a trial. 5 to 10 years for a misdemeanor or for a felony.
Yes, very interesting. Secretary Heffernan, there is also another law that your office is worked on, the distracted driving law. Would you like to comment on that?
I would like to, and it's funny, I've been traveling around a bit with the governor and with the lieutenant governor and on my own, talking to a lot of young people, high school students particularly, because distracted driving is a terrible scourge, and we've sadly seen a trooper killed with because of a drunk driver. But young people either text, or with all our iPhones and Androids, and you get so distracted that it's really a problem. And in fact, this morning I was just with the governor at an announcement out at State Police, where we're joining forces with the Department of Transportation, Construction Industries of Massachusetts, and EOPS to bring some real help to construction sites, because the construction workers and the police that are doing the details are at risk by distracted drivers who, see a site. There is the move over law, which you're required to move over, but they'll see a construction site and may not know how far to pull over, how to slow down. So what we announced today are some real ways to help people understand what they're required to do when they come upon a construction site. It makes for a split-second decision, and hopefully will make people safer.
Yes, and the more information. I wanted to just follow up on that question and just find out how easy, or how could the distracted driving law be enforced?
Well, I'll tell you, it is something, and I can get specific statistics for you on that, but I know that distracted driving, it needs to be enforced. We need to do it. I mean, I have 2 teenagers, and I need to all the time tell myself, ever since this law was passed, I have, believe me, made sure that I am not driving while texting or looking at anything else.
It's very hard.
And yes, but my daughter reminds me of that, and I think that the more we get that message out, we will be reminded to keep safe behind the wheel.
Thank you. For all our viewers, this is Discovering the Law. My name is Attorney Lucy Rivera, and today our guest is Secretary of Public Safety and Security, Heffernan. And Secretary Heffernan, we are running out of time in our program, but we're delighted that you were able to come to our program today and for your time. Are there any last remarks that you'd like to say to our audience before we?
I just want to make sure everyone stays safe while driving. That's my big thing. So thank you, and thank you so much for having me on. I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you for coming, Secretary Heffernan. And please, there is a copy of this video at www.discoveringthelaw.net. I look forward to hearing your comments about this episode and any other episodes. My name again is Attorney Lucy Rivera. I could be contacted at lucinda.rivera@discoveringthelaw.net. And thank you so much for watching today.